Okay, we know it's being recorded, so. It's a start I love when just.
Okay, got it.
Jerry, how are you?
Hey, how you, Will? On my own music. Yeah.
It's actually very good. You don't have to be on Jerry's shoulders to be seen.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry, all good. Hold on now.
Teresa, how are you?
Hi, Will. How are
You
you?
can see people.
Lovely to see you.
I can.
So thank you.
Teresa,
Teresa,
just come around a bit. Come around. Teresa comes around a bit.
Teresa yourself be on the front. I know, I
Just
can.
come around.
No, I don't.
Yeah, keep
I know, I see that.
That means
they can see us, does it?
Invar, you made it in okay?
Hi, Will. Go on to that again because the things came up on the bottom.
Where?
There you are.
Hi, Will.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good evening there. How you doing?
How are we?
Grand, thank you. Well, say hello.
Finton, it's you. Sorry, I couldn't see you there.
I'm in here, Angelo. I'm in. Let me.
Hi, Owen, turn on your mic.
Hi, Rage. How are you?
At the top
Just
right.
have
Hi,
to-
Will.
How are you? Hey, Bridget.
There.
Lovely to see you.
You
Hi,
too.
Will. Hi, Will. We're in beautiful Achill.
Ah, wonderful,
Oh,
wonderful.
Yeah, just show you a view out the window.
Did you look it up?
Please do.
It's an open.
We'll go on mute and off video, but we'll still be here. Don't worry.
Brilliant. Oh, you've been on every single one of them, so thanks for sharing the location.
Haven't done it.
Yeah.
Michael.
So.
Open Chrome.
Well, look, you know, where in Achill are you, Kevin?
I know, yeah.
Oh, where are we in Achill?
Not signed.
Dugart.
Ah, lovely. I was there this time last year myself for holidays. Lovely spot.
Oh yeah.
And
It's a wild place.
please God, you'll get a pint, Kevin. I couldn't get a pint this time last year, so.
Well, we climbed the head of the
Achill Head.
Achill Head today.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, and it's a pretty decent climb, isn't it?
It is, definitely.
You've earned it. You've earned it. Fantastic. That's brilliant.
Okay, we leave you to it.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thanks for joining, guys. Enjoy it.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, look, you're all really welcome. I know we're still waiting on more to call in.
Full screen, because sometimes you can't do Chromecast.
And what I'll do is I will just mute people for a moment. We don't like doing it because it's actually the best part of the whole tasting. But yeah, I've just done that for a moment. So just as more people join, we're expecting Pierangelo in a moment. We did talk to him there a few minutes ago. So his internet in Italy does work. I think he's juggling a few screens on a few internet providers because he's got Italy and Turkey are playing tonight in the opening of the Euros. And that kicks on in about an hour and a half, I think, ourselves. So he says that it's not important and that this is his priority for the evening, but it remains to be seen whether he'll be itching to show up later on. We believe him. We do believe him. But
I was talking to him just there, Will. He's still be on in 1 second anyway. So I had to send him on another link, but he.
I'm here, guys. I'm here.
Hey.
I'm sorry. Ciao, everyone.
Lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine. Nice to see many people attending. Thank you so much.
Look, it's Pierangelo, we sometimes we do a lot of virtual tastings here, and as you know, more than any of us would want to be doing, but they're necessary more than ever, I suppose, in the last year. And but what we do all know is when we talk about wine styles that Irish people love, Ripasso and Valpolicella and the Veneto area comes up again and again and again. So we love our juicy red wines, we love our crisp whites in Ireland, and aside from that, we love our Riojas, we love our Burgundy, our Malbecs. But the wines, we love our wine, I think. But the wines tonight I think are going to have a special place and strike a chord. A lot of us know Tomassi wines. Tomassi wines are really well regarded here. Cassidy and Owen is on the call here from Cassidy Wines, who do a great job. Bridget is here as well. You're welcome, Bridget. But they do a great job with Tomassi, promoting them up and down the length and breadth of the country. So we're one of many really delighted suppliers and privileged to have Pierangelo tonight. But just a couple of quick things I'll just kind of mention briefly before we kick in. Firstly, you know, we're going to start naturally on the white and go into the reds then after that. Pierangelo is going to give us a 5 to 10 minute maybe introduction to the winery. He's a lovely presentation done up for us, and he's going to give us a 5 to 10 minute introduction to the winery and to what Tomassi do and their history, and there's so much of that. So kick back with a glass of Lugana of the white wine while he does that, and while we get into it, and then we'll actually go into the wines themselves thereafter and kick on. Please ask questions. These only work. Michael and I are doing these, and we're doing them 12, 13, 14 months now. Many of you have been on all of them, and you all know at this stage, they work brilliant if you engage, ask questions, either on the chat or directly as well. Feel free to jump in when we're on the wines themselves. Please do, because, you know, here's your chance, talking directly with Pierangelo, who normally would be in trade and only meeting with restaurants or with trade or with distributors. So these are great chances to actually get up front close with the winemakers themselves. So that's a great chance. Lastly then, this has been recorded, so anyone has to dip out or dive out, or if you only open a couple of wines, you know at this stage that they're recorded, and next week we'll send the recording to all of you. And the very last point I'll make before I get off and we get stuck into wine is Cassidy Wines and Pierangelo, Pierangelo sent over all of the goodies that you got in the box, the wine opener, the recipe booklet, the ice bag. But Cassidy Wines in Dublin have done a huge amount to help support a big promotion on it. So on our homepage tonight, as we go through on the chat, I'll pop in the links to each of the wines so you can see a bit more detail and the Irish pricing of the wines. But there's a flat 20% off all of the Tomassi wines in the range and on the tasting tonight on our homepage of our site, right through for the next 8-9 days until Father's Day. So the prices, as I think you'll see when we go through them, are like phenomenal, and it's because of the support of both the winery and of Cassidy's. So big thanks to you guys as well for that. Anyway, from me, let's get into wine. Let's drink some wine, some Lugana. Michael, though, just before we'll introduce Pierangelo.
Hello. So this is the last of our winemaker series, and we want to finish with a flourish, with a bang. And Pierangelo is the very man to do this. He's a headline act. He's just awesome. I've spoken to him before, and it's just a joy. So yeah, sit back, enjoy your glass of Lugana, and Pierangelo is going to take you through a fantastic journey. So take it away, Pierangelo.
Grazie. Thank you all, guys. Big thank you to you, Will and Michael, and for inviting in a way Tommasi and myself specifically. I'm very excited, and we will have a good time for sure. And a big thank you also to Cassidy Wines. You will mentioned earlier that we have actually been working with Cassidy Wines for a very long time, and I have to say that when a gentleman called Kevin Cassidy established Cassidy Wines in 1977. I was 2-year-old back then. The very first wine that he brought in Ireland, that was Tommasi Amarone Classico. So we have been with Cassidy Wines ever since, which means 44 years. So it's really a very historic market, Ireland, for Tommasi, and once again, an additional reason for me to be excited for the tasting tonight. So thank you. So I will share this presentation to, well, I think you need to allow me, Will, in again.
Sorry, to be able to this second. That should be
done. Take your time.
No, you should be fine there now.
Yes, here we go. So a quick introduction again that helps us to understand a little more about Tommasi before we get to try these 5 beautiful wines. As you can see, our family holding is under the name Tommasi Family Estates, and our history goes back a very long time ago, 119 years ago, 1902, when my great-grandfather bought the Raphael vineyard, and here we go, Raphael, the name of one of the 5 wines of the night. And he started this family business, which has been going on through 2nd and 3rd generation, and then up to 1997, which is when my generation, represented by myself and 8 more members between brothers and cousins, we actually stepped in and took over from our fathers. As you can see from this slide, I marked 3 dates in particular. 1902, as I mentioned, which is the date when everything started. 1959, which is the year when, for the first time, with the 3rd generations of my father and my uncles, we produced the most important wine of Tommasi, and in general, the most important wine of the whole Valpolicella region, which is Amarone. And then 1997, as I said earlier, the date when my generation stepped in and took over from our fathers. We are a large family, 9 members working together since 1997 between brothers and cousins, excuse me. Everyone has a specific role in the business, and I have to say that besides myself, Giancarlo is the one that I would like to point. Yes, he's the enologist of the whole family group. I will say a few more about Giancarlo a little later. Where are we actually as a family company? We own 6 wineries in 6 different regions in Italy, actually 5 different regions in Italy, because in Tuscany, we actually own 2 wineries. But no doubt that the historic one, the Tommasi one from Verona, has been by far not only the largest one, but also the most known, as we have been working with these wines from this region since 1902, as I said earlier. However, driven by some different reasons, the fact that we're a large family, the fact that we are very, dynamic, and we have had the ambition to grow our business outside of Veneto. In 1997, exactly the year when we took over from our fathers, we started a very exciting journey of expansion, which has brought us to acquire these other 5 estates from in these different regions in Italy. Most of them are actually in Ireland, and of course, they're all represented by Custody Wines. The whole group, so the whole 6 estates together, just to give you quickly some numbers, 599 hectares of vineyards. Basically, they're all under vine. Why is that? Because we are farmers. So our business, our growth has always been driven with the ambition to buy vineyards and grow our business from the land, from there. 3.4 million bottles overall produced from these 599 hectares, and export represents a big share in our business, is actually 86%. And as you can see, we export to more than 70 countries. I go back to the point that with Custody Wines in 1977, along with the United States and Germany, they actually represent the first 3 markets where we started our, let's say, career outside of Italy. The team of enologists, there are 3 guys that really look after production full time. Giancarlo, again, my cousin, the head of the team, who works in close cooperation with Emiliano, this gentleman that looks after the central Italy, so Tuscan wines, and Fabio, who looks after the southern Italian wine. What about myself? Very quickly, I've always been the export manager since I joined. I'm also in a way involved in the wine production as well, but export has been my main role since a long time. And 3 years ago, I was in a way promoted to the role of executive director. We now focus on the Tommasi Verona, on the Veneto wines, as all 5 wines, as I said earlier, are actually part of this estate. And the first one is actually the Lugana. Let me mark Veneto again. I'm sure that everyone is aware of Veneto being in the region in the northeast. Venice, which is here along the seaside, is the capital of Veneto. And Verona, the city which we belong to, is here on the west side. Very famous and important wine city because you produce wines everywhere. In the northern part, which is where I am based, the Valpolicella area, but also on the south part. And what does it mean? Close to the largest lake of Italy, which is called Lake Garda. So Lake Garda just west from Verona, west from the Valpolicella area. And the southern part of Lake Garda is the white wine region called Lugana. So the white wine Lugana is not just the name of the wine, but it is actually also the name of the region where this wine is made. Fairly small area, I would say, in this specific part, where we personally own a total of 45 hectares. We're one of the largest landowner in the region. And the 45 hectares are broken down in 3 different plots. As you can see, I marked them 1, 2, and 3. And the reason why I'd like to explain a little more about that is because the soil, pretty much everywhere in the Lugana area, is based primarily on clay. However, that is more, say, closer to the lake, like where we have plot 1. Whereas, if you are more inland, like plot 2 and 3, the soil is a bit more with presence of sand and loam. And again, the reason why I'm glad to share these little technical details is because these 2 different soils, in a way, how do you say, release different characteristics to the Lugana. What do I mean to say? Clay means that you gain primarily structure, whereas sand delivers more the aromatic notes that you primarily enjoy in the nose of the Lugana. This is actually a picture of our plot 1, and you appreciate how close we are to the Lake Garda, which is quite important also in terms of microclimate, the nice influence of the breeze blowing from the lake. And what is the grape? It is called Turbiana. It is an indigenous varietal. You grow it in the Lugana area. The law requires Turbiana to be used for minimum 85% in the whole Lugana production. We personally produce our Lugana from Le Fornaci vineyard. By the way, if you wonder what Le Fornaci means, it is the name of the estate. So our Lugana is produced 100% with the Turbiana grape. So we can now enjoy the tasting of this beautiful wine. It is actually one of the fastest growing Italian white wine in terms of success and in a way recognition, not only in Italy, which still represents the #1 market for this whole appellation, but the wine is really growing its success also in more, let's say, more matured export markets. The reason why we personally love this wine is the fact that it is very fresh, very aromatic and intense on the nose, especially when the wine is still young, like it is today. So you can appreciate it. You can appreciate it without food, but it is also a great match with food. And there I would personally recommend fish, if I could choose one thing in particular. But on the other hand, the pretty high level of acidity that this wine has, thanks to the soil and thanks to the characteristic of the grape Turbiana, allow this wine to really last pretty long. So although the production from the technical standpoint, it is entirely made in stainless steel tanks, so there is no really need to age it in oak barrels, for instance. However, the wine has the characteristic and the personality to age. So you can enjoy it young and fresh, but you can also store it for, let's say, 2 or 3 years, when, of course, you would appreciate it more, the structure, the elegance that would develop over time.
Pierangelo, can I ask, you've answered a load of questions I immediately had there about the oak, and would you ever see this as a wine that would work in oak? Would it change it? Would it even work at all? Do you ever oak it? Have you ever tried it?
Yes, we do actually, and in fact, we know that the nature of the varietal can support the oak. What I was trying to say earlier is that it is not necessary to age it in oak to gain this complexity and structure and to have this wine with potentials of aging. However, there is a, can I call it an older brother, so to speak, within the Lugana appellation, which is Lugana Riserva, that requires a longer period of maturation, either in stainless steel, in oak, or both. And our Lugana Riserva, which will actually be officially released in September, so in a few months, that is actually the white that we decided to age in oak. Actually, not entirely in oak, 25% in oak and 75% in stainless steel. You will have the chance to try the Lugana Riserva from Tommasi in a few months, and you will appreciate that the structure in Lugana Riserva is in a way even bigger, which is actually the reason why you produce a Lugana Riserva, otherwise you wouldn't. And you would appreciate also that the presence of oak is definitely not really changing the profile of the characteristic of the flavors that you get from the Turbiana grape. So you would just appreciate a sort of a bigger brother, a bit more structured, but still very pleasant to drink. Technically, we can also say the Lugana Riserva, thanks to the oak as well, would probably age even longer than the more basic Lugana, which is what we have tonight.
Lovely, thanks a million. And also, I mean, if you were to look at this wine 7-8 years on, like I know it's a wine that's you say 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
Recently, I've tried some Lugana that's been 7-8 years old, and it really works. So, where would this be in 7-8 years' time?
Well, you see, I mean, I agree with you that you can definitely hold it that long. On the other hand, I say that, I mean, generally speaking, there is a risk sometimes in a white wine in particular, then when you age it too long, it loses the freshness, the brightness of the acidity, which is most of the time what people would enjoy the most in a white wine though. So in my opinion, a Lugana can last that long, but my recommendation would be to consider maybe 3 up to 4 years max. It would then become a bit too complex and lose that enjoyable freshness, which I think is one of the key of the success that Lugana has been experiencing now pretty much all over the world.
It's lovely. It's the whole zestiness and the simplicity of the grape itself makes it such a lovely wine.
Yeah, it is. I mean, see, Turbiana has a fascinating story. You probably know the Trebbiano grape, which is one of the largest family of white grape varieties that you grow in different regions in Italy. And we can say that Turbiana is actually in a way a clone that is part of the big Trebbiano family. However, when from Trebbiano grapes, you usually produce very light, acidic and simple whites, Turbiana is way different. I mean, again, in one end, you still make it fresh, enjoyable, and let me say easy to drink when it is young. But on the other hand, as we just described, it has all the characteristics to really last fairly long. And so this is quite unique to this varietal, which is the clone, but also I believe pretty much the fact that it is produced on the soil where clay plays a major role in the final characteristic of the wine. Yeah,
Trebbiano really gets a bad reputation wherever it goes for being something that overcrops and makes very insipid, forgetful wines. Yeah, I have to say, this is my opinion, of course, that unfortunately when a wine or a varietal suffers from a bad image that maybe goes back many years ago, it is difficult to change people's mind, people's perception to it. There are lovely white wines based on Trebbiano grapes today, but I agree with you that most of the time you would think of Trebbiano as a very simple white wine. It is not always the case. Luckily, and this is part of the history, this specific clone of Trebbiano has always been called Turbiana. So there is a way, no risk of misperception, of a confusion. So you really focus on Turbiana and you don't think of Trebbiano. And that is also an important part of, again, of a success of Lugana specifically and a wine more in general. Fantastic. It's super.
It's just so fresh and vibrant,
yeah.
Isn't it? It's just over the last few years, Pierangelo, I think it's a style that a lot of us in Ireland have just not really known. We just haven't really traditionally thought of Ireland, of Italy for whites, because just the reds are so popular. But more and more now, when you look for something fresh and different and new, where people have tired of other styles, Put Lugana
It's
in
the
front of
same
them
way
and
as Albarino has brought white wine from Spain to the fore. I think Lugano will do the same for Italy.
Is that, can I ask if anyone across the board, if anyone else has any comment on that, or like, is Lugana something that many of us knew? Would it have been widely known around the place, or is this wine a surprise to any of you tonight who might have actually come on the tasting because of the reds, for example? Because it suits perfectly with all types of food that we eat here, seafood particularly, of course. Jerry and Portmarnock, how are you guys doing? Are you like this?
I think Jerry's on
mute. Jerry's on mute. We were
Sorry, guys. Yeah. Hi, Will. Well, we actually we got off to a slightly earlier start because we had our dinner, and with the wines open, we couldn't resist them until the tasting. So we've already been through a couple of them. Yeah, I mean, I've always been a great fan of the whites from northern Italy. The likes of the Gavis and that. And it was an interesting bit of knowledge there from Pierangelo, because I always understood that the Lugana was made from the Trebbiano di Lugana, which is the same grape.
You are correct, Jerry, and yes, it is the same grape, and that's actually interesting to share with you all. I try to make a long story short. I promise. The clone in that area has always been called a Turbiana. And in fact, if you travel in the area and you interview let's say the old generation of vintners in the region, they would tell you that the name most likely come from the local dialect accent to pronounce Trebbiano. So they would call it Turbian. All right.
Very good, because it's an area I visited many times around Lake Garda, and it's a wonderful part of Italy. And I think you benefit so much from the mountainous regions, and as you say, the microclimates coming in from the lake. But I also think that Trebbiano probably is also identified with maybe a grape producing mass varieties of wine. That it's I think the Turbiana is an interesting it's an interesting clone.
It is, and you see, and going back to your question though, and to Will's point earlier, Trebbiano di Lugana, that means Trebbiano from Lugana. It's been the way we have called and explained this varietal pretty much everyone in the area until I would say 4, maybe 5 years ago, when this region and this wine in particular has started gaining success in more markets than just basically Italy and Germany, that are by far the largest ones. And so the producers, including Tommasi, got around the table one day and decided that in order to give this wine a bit more of its own identity, it would be smart to stop using the name Trebbiano di Lugana and focus on the original varietal name of the varietal, which is in fact Turbiana. Whereas years ago, calling the grape Trebbiano di Lugana was probably a way to simplify the communication, because for some reason, I don't know, we maybe thought that Turbiano would be even a difficult name for foreign people to pronounce, because sometimes you also think of what it can be easier for consumers to remember and to pronounce. But now, in the last 5 years, we decided to go back to the original name, and now you can see from every Lugana producer's website, technical sheets, back labels, whatsoever, that everybody mentions the grape as Turbiana.
Turbiana, yeah. You pronounce it so much better than we do.
All right. Thank you. Jerry, I promise that if you get 3 glasses or 4 glasses of Lugana, your pronunciation will be perfect.
Well, we're working on it. We're working on it.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I interrupted somebody. Somebody was going to say something.
I was just going to say, I think we should move on to the Arele.
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
So, we can now start the tasting of the red wines. Let me pour Arele for me, though. And I can go back and share the presentation so that I continue. I mean, all 4 red wines of the tasting tonight are actually produced in the Valpolicella area. So I think it's good to start by showing the map of the region. I mean, the map, of course, I mean, the region seems to be flat when you look at the map. In reality, it is not really flat at all. And before going a little more into details of the vineyards, you should imagine this region like a hand with 5 fingers, where each finger represents a hill, and then you have valleys in between. So from west to east, when you go through it, you go through 5 hills and 4 valleys. And now I have the chance to prove it. Here is, as an example, one of the vineyards that we own called Caflorian, which is actually up on the hill. And by the way, a pretty steep hill where a long time ago, the best way to really plant the vineyard was by building terraces, which are actually supported by these dry walls, and then which allows, in a way, to pick the grapes by hand in a pretty easy way. This training system, which is quite historic in the Valpolicella area, is actually called pergola. But then moving on to other vineyards, I can point a very important one for our family, which is called Conca d'Oro. Here again, you appreciate the altitude of the hill. Here, the terraces are pretty a bit more wide than the previous one. So you can see there are more than just one row of vines. But here you can see the mountains are actually on top of the Valpolicella area, quite important because they protect the region from the strong wind that can come from north. And they are sort of a, protection like an amphitheater on the northwest and northeast side of the whole Valpolicella region. And then another very important vineyard, I'm talking about 250 meters above sea level, called La Grovetta, which I will mention that again a little later, which is also quite important up on the hill. But for example, there are also valleys, as I say, and give it a look. This is the largest estate that we own, called Prunea, and here you can appreciate how flat that area is. So hills and valleys, they represent the region. You grow the same indigenous varieties, which I will mention in a little while, but by Mother Nature reasons, we can say that the more you are up on the hill, the better is the quality of the grapes. So the more premium wines are usually produced from the hillside vineyards, whereas the more, I would say, commercial or easier to drink wines are generally produced from the valley vineyards. 4 main indigenous grape varieties. Corvina, by far the most important one, the one that we call the queen of the Veronese grapes. Rondinella, the second most used in the blends. Corvinone, which is in a way part of Corvina family, but with bigger berries. And that is quite important, in particular, when you produce Amarone. And then you have Oseleta, which is a native varietal produced in very small quantity in the area. And we actually use Oseleta in a few wines. Arele as a wine, before we get to try it, where does the name of the wine come from? Arele, from these very traditional large bamboo racks. These are the typical racks that we have had in our wineries since the very, very beginning of our history. And this is where the grapes are actually laid down and dried. This is the process to produce Amarone, but in the wine Arele, okay, 30% of the grapes that are used in the blend to produce this wine are actually partially dried. So when I say partially dried, it means for approximately 40 to 45 days. So again, 30% of the whole production comes from grapes, which we let them dry 45 days to lose a bit of water and concentrate the juice a bit more with natural sugar. The remaining percentage is actually made with fresh grapes. And then after that, once the fermentation of both, say, wines is ended, is finished, we make the blend and we put the wine in oak barrels for approximately 1 year to complete the maturation. So here is actually the result of this process, a wine that is in a way unique to Tommasi. It's not the drying process that is actually unique to Tommasi, of course, but the way we make Arele is pretty unique. And Arele is a wine that we own. We registered that as a trademark for this specific wine. There are actually 4 grapes in this wine, in the blend. In addition, together with the indigenous ones, Corvina, Rondinella, and Oseleta that I mentioned, there is also a little bit of Merlot. So in this wine year, we decided also to experiment in the blend a little bit of a grape that you cannot consider indigenous from the area. It's a widely internationally known varietal, which grows nicely in the Valpolicella area as well. And a small percentage of Merlot allows the whole blend to gain a bit of softness, gentleness, which really make the wine very pleasant to drink. Briefly, all the red wines from the Valpolicella area have one clear characteristic in common, the notes of cherry. Valpolicella region is also called the land of cherries. There are hundreds, or actually I would say thousands of cherry trees all over. And the cherry trees really have in a way an influence to the varietal. So that is a quite important characteristic you can get. In some wines a bit fresher, in some other wines a bit more matured. That said, the goal with this one here is to make it, let me say, medium bodied. So not too light, not too heavy, but quite nice, very soft in tannins, very gentle. And the fact that, you know, there is a percentage, 30% made with that dry grapes that allow to gain a bit more sugar, if you will, when the whole blend is over and the wine has spent its year of aging in oak, the result is really a drinkable wine, a very smooth and enjoyable with any kind of food. So this is really a successful wine in the sense that you don't have a hard time to think, what am I going to eat if I want to enjoy a glass of Arele?
I know from experience that when people ask me for a wine that brings them away from Merlot, but a sort of a bridge, I always recommend these sort of wines with a little bit of a passamento process, because it has that lovely softness and it's a full-bodied wine like the Irish people like, but it's got a roundness and a lovely softness.
Thank you.
Lovely introduction to the style, actually, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because that Merlot just gives it that lovely roundness. Food-wise, Pierangelo, where would you put this? I mean, this is good on its own, but I imagine with a bit of protein, this is now we're starting.
Cheese.
I mean, cheese. Any protein meats, I imagine now this is just going to lift all of the flavors here, isn't it? It's a really lovely one. Also, Pierangelo, just Mark has asked us on the chat about irrigation and whether you're permitted to irrigate the vines in this area, because the photos look very hot.
Yeah, we are actually by law say that regulations about irrigation depend on the denomination of each wine you produce. So wines like this Arele, which is an IGT, where there is a bit more freedom in a way to play with blends and everything, their irrigation is always allowed, no matter where you are in Italy. Then when you get into the DOC or DOCG wines, some regions do allow, some regions don't. Valpolicella area for the DOC and DOCG wines, so Ripasso, Valpolicella, and Amarone, irrigation is allowed. However, by experience, I can say that you need more irrigation in support, especially when spring and summers are very hot, obviously. In those vineyards that are a bit more towards the valley or at the valley, whereas you don't really need irrigation in the vineyards that are pretty up on the hills. And the reason for that is because the roots have, in a way, more space to grow, so to speak, and they always get enough humidity from underground, and they rarely suffer from dry seasons and hot weather.
Okay, thanks.
And the other thing is, how is the climate change? We asked this to all the winemakers and all the people we have here. How is climate change changing your? How are you?
Your approach.
Your approach, yeah, basically.
Well, that's a good question, and I think that when you talk about global warming, we would probably need to have much more time than what we have tonight to discuss. We definitely see a difference in the area, no question about it. Luckily, at least for Tommasi, if I can speak for myself, the most important vineyards are up on the hills, where either because of the altitude or the fact that we are exposed to the nice breeze that come either from the lake or from the mountains, etc., we are not worried at all. We are a bit more worried for those vineyards that are more down on the valley. What is going to change there? It is a big question, and I don't pretend to have the answer to that. My guess is that, like everything in the world, technology develops. Vine nursery will most likely and they will work to probably create new clones from the same varieties. They might be able to support more a warmer climate in the future. So something will happen from the vine industry, which will allow us to really continue producing good wines and respecting the warmer weather that is no question is basically everywhere. Last but not least, the more you own inside vineyards, the more safe you are. And we are not that concerned, luckily, because most of our vineyards are actually up there.
Excellent.
Great. Yeah, good answer. Well, you've got 5 properties, I suppose, Pierangelo. You can try. I mean, are you trialing new grape varieties as well among the different properties?
No, not at the moment, because again, these experiments, as I call them, they're basically like a work in progress. There will be soon the chance to try. We will actually. I can tell you that the region where we are based, which is more in a risk, so to speak, is Apulia, so southern Italy. And in addition to being in southern Italy, it is also pretty much at sea level. So the climate down there is really very hot, and the summers are very long. But otherwise, Valpolicella area, Montalcino, even in Maremma, our vineyards are pretty high in elevation. So we are not concerned. We're watching. We're very curious to see what is going to happen. And as soon as we are in a way, we are guaranteed that these new clones will be really worth to be planted, we will certainly do.
Okay.
So this is a nice conversation that I may suggest to discuss again in, say, 3 years, maybe 5 years from today, when we will also be a lot more experienced and more precise in give you an answer.
So long as we can do all of that in person, all of us together in Dublin, you come over here and we'll open all the wine.
I promise.
I don't think there's anyone who would say no to that. Will we move to Rafa now?
Yes. So again, I pour the wine. So the next one is actually Rafael, which is our Valpolicella Classico Superiore. This is the vineyard. You might remember from the beginning of my presentation that I mentioned that vineyard. This is exactly where our business started in 1902, when my great-grandfather bought this vineyard from another family and started the Tommasi family business. Actually, the tower that you can see here on the right hand of the slide, which is only a part of the house, that is the Tommasi family house. And you would probably recognize that on the label of Amarone. not so much in the Raphael, but in the Amarone label. So Raphael is a vineyard dedicated to one specific wine, which is the Valpolicella Classico Superiore. I stay on the slide for a moment because I'd like to point a couple of details in the name of the wine. So Raphael is the vineyard, and that specifically belongs to Tommasi. Valpolicella is the wine, which of course takes the name from the region. Classico is the central side of the Valpolicella area, so-called Classico, that basically means historic. And then the word superiore, which is not in every Valpolicella wine. Superiore by law means when the Valpolicella spends minimum 1 year of maturation before it is actually released. So 1 year of maturation, it means that it can either be stainless steel, oak, or both. But only 1 year after, you can actually call it superiore. It gains that extra designation, so to speak. So Raphael is actually Valpolicella Classico Superiore, and we specifically age it for 15 months in large oak barrel. This is actually the perfect example of the characteristics of the grapes that you grow in the Valpolicella area. Arele is pretty good example of what you can get from the area. However, it has a small percentage of Merlot, and it also has a 30% of dry grapes, which is in a way a technique that helps make the wine slightly more this or that. Raphael is a pure Valpolicella from the vineyard to the bottle. So if you really wonder, what do you really get from the Corvina, Rondinella, and Molinara grapes? You get these flavors. We consider Valpolicella Classico Superiore the middle brother in the Valpolicella family of wines. In a way, I can use the same expressions that I did earlier with Arele. Not too light, not too heavy. It's around 12.5% alcohol, so quite reasonable. Very fresh, very fruity, a lot of cherry for sure, and an easy wine to drink. Easy in a sense, you can have a glass by itself on its own, but you can also enjoy with some food. And here, if I may recommend something in particular, I would say pizza, for instance. I would say white meat. Yeah, why not red meat as well? But when you get red meat, as long as I have more structured red wines in my family, such as Ripasso and Amarone, there I would go more with those wines with red meat if I could choose. White meat and again pizza are definitely my favorite when I get a glass of Raphael. Very successful wine, very historic, and again we say that when you don't know a winery, when you don't know enough a winery from the Valpolicella area, and you want to get to know that winery a little more, in a sense of, does it produce good wines or bad wines? Do I like it or not, etc. It would be easy to get to know that winery with Amarone. Easy in the sense that Amarone is definitely an extraordinary wine, but to really taste the characteristic of that winery, the style and the quality, this is the perfect wine for a test. When you like this wine, you can be positive and optimistic that you will probably also enjoy the rest of the portfolio, because this really is the benchmark to really classify a winery, if you like it or not, based in the Valpolicella area.
I always recommend, Pierangelo, in Ireland, we've had a history of Valpolicella being, again, having very poor versions of it in the country. And I think that this is exactly what we should be drinking as Valpolicella. It really brings forward exactly as it should be. It's an excellent wine.
Well, I thank you for that. Earlier, we discussed examples without necessarily mentioning anyone in particular. When For some reasons, in the past, they didn't have such a good reputation. And even though they have improved, you will still remember them as a bad wine or a bad region whatsoever. I can say the Valpolicella wine or Valpolicella region more in general, in some markets many years ago, have suffered of that image of being a mass-oriented area. I didn't mention earlier, but Valpolicella is one of the largest wine regions in the whole country. We're based on more than 8,000 hectares, which is a lot. However, I am very proud to say that I would say in the last 20 years, the progress that the whole region has made has been amazing, and different reasons for that. But one in particular, I can say that the winemakers or vintners have finally understood that a good wine is made in the vineyards before being made in the winery. So there used to be a time when the production from the vineyards was very high yields, too much. And then the winemakers were not really so good and able to transform that mass production into a good wine. But nowadays, the yield are much lower. The area here is phenomenal. And again, make long story short, Raphael represents a perfect example of a very good value for money that everyone can be pleased with.
Yeah, I second that. I think it's great, and it's great to hear, Pierangelo, that you mentioned it's a really good point, well made, I think, for people to hear you say about yield and about the grapes as they, because quite often I think when I've discovered, I think when we do tastings, that people think about winemakers, about what the winemaker can do in the winery when the grapes come in, and their choice of barrels and how long, and the percentages that they'll age an oak and for how long they will, and so on. But the yield is just so crucially important, and what happens out in the vineyard. And it's almost like a light bulb moment, I suppose, the first time some of us hear that idea that actually, yes, if we take less grapes from the vine, the quality is going to be higher. And it's very obvious. It's a really obvious point, but it's sometimes actually, it's really good to point it out, because it gives the winemaker the very best chance, I suppose, when the grapes come in.
Yes. I mean, the winemakers today, you would think that they would spend most of their time in the cellar, but they have to spend equal time in the vineyards as in the cellar. I mean, they really have to know what happens in the vineyard. They have to guide the vineyard manager to really take the vineyards to produce what they want, what they need. Winemakers have to have in mind what is the wine that they are going to produce. And therefore, they drive the vineyard managers really to take care of the vineyard in order to get the quality and the quantity that they need to produce that specific wine.
It's like a labor word. In order for somebody to become a great person, they have to have good genes to start with. Then they go to school.
Yeah, bravo. I love it.
Choose your parents carefully. Choose your parents carefully. So should we do Ripasso?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay. It's,
So,
huge level, huge jump up there in quality, I think, actually. Like, for not a big difference in price, actually, to jump up into Raphael, but it's really well
It's a different style, though. It's got that lovely sort of acidity to it as well. It's a much different style, I think.
yeah, you see, I mean, this allows me to say that until a few years ago, the Valpolicella wines, so wines like Raphael, but also Ripasso, Amarone, used to be in a way a bit sweeter, like with a higher residual sugar. But it's been actually a clear decision of winemakers to lower the residual sugar to make them become a bit more fresh and with a bit more acidity, which in the end is very enjoyable. And we can see that, generally speaking, consumers worldwide appreciate more and more wines that have that nice freshness, rather than being too big, too bold, and too sweet in a way. So Concadoro Vineyard, it's the name of the vineyard that we own up on the hill, one of those hills, one of those fingers that I mentioned earlier. Concadoro actually means the golden shell. That's due to the shape of the hill. And this is the vineyard where we pick the grapes to produce the Ripasso. Now, when when you don't really know exactly what ripasso means and you describe the wine, it usually takes a bit more time because it's a specific technique. I promise to be as short, as clear as I can. Let me say, first of all, that this wine is also a DOC Valpolicella Classico Superiore. So in a way like Raphael is. So technically they belong to the same group, but ripasso is something extra. And ripasso literally means repass. So the name ripasso, which is the name of the appellation, but it is also the name of a method used in winemaking to produce finally this wine. What does it mean, repass? Repass, it means that you first produce a fresh wine. So you crush the grapes right after you pick them in a vineyard. So you ferment it like you do for every other wine. But then before you actually put the wine in barrel for a certain period of aging, you actually re-ferment it by repassing it over the dried grapes of the Amarone. So we get to talk about Amarone in a few minutes. I will clarify with a bit more details the fact that the grapes have to dry for a long time. And once these dry grapes have been used to ferment the Amarone wine, they can be used again a second time by repassing over them a fresher Valpolicella that was actually produced 5 months before. So this technique is actually called ripasso again. And why do we repass it? What do we want to gain by repassing it over the Amarone skins? We want the wine to start a secondary fermentation. So by re-fermenting, this Valpolicella wine gains extractions because it actually scrapes extractions from the Amarone skins. And the result is that it gains a bit more of everything. It gains, it gains color extractions from the skins, it gains structure, it gains flavors, it gains a little bit of everything. So the result is a Valpolicella Classico Superiore, yes, but a bit bigger and more structured than the younger brother, Raphael. So when you put the two wines side by side, or you taste them side by side, you appreciate that they have a lot in common. The grapes are pretty much the same. Yes, maybe percentage can be slightly different, but however, the varieties are the same. They are like younger brother and older brother. We described the Raphael earlier. When we get to talk about ripasso, when you get to buy and drink ripasso, you have to expect a bigger wine than Raphael, with more structure, with more complexity, actually with longer aging potential as well. So as we are actually a family, I like to introduce the wines like family members. Raphael and ripasso like younger brother and bigger brother.
And it's brilliant, isn't it?
Well, I find it's the same. It's slightly the same process of the Orelli, but it's much more like the Valpolicella insofar as it's got gorgeous acidity, it's got great structure, and no real sweetness, just lovely fruit and
freshness,
and
real
freshness,
freshness.
yeah.
You see, I mean, there might be a similarity in the flavors between Arele and Ripasso, but they come from two different ways. Arele, as I said, it is mainly due to the 30% of partially dry grapes, whereas here, that those flavors, that roundness in a way is mainly gained from the re-fermentation process, which really brings the wine to the next level. Then if you taste Arele and Ripasso side by side, you realize they're not the same wine. Of course, there are similarities, but they're not really the same wine. I mean, Arele has also that percentage of Merlot in the blend, whereas the Ripasso is 100% authentic Valpolicella wine, Valpolicella style. Ripasso has gained over the years a nickname. It is called the baby Amarone. So just like one step underneath Amarone and half of the step above the younger brother Raphael. It's a great it's a great wine in the sense that when you feel that you want to enjoy a sort of a medium body red wine and with nice complexity, but for some reason you don't really want to have the big boy Amarone in terms of structure, alcohol, and also price. And, because in the end, you also need to look at your wallet, how much you want to spend for your bottle of wine. A Ripasso is a great compromise, right in between a more affordable and easier drinking wine like Raphael and the more premium and top of the range Amarone.
Does it make this one of the biggest selling of the five of the range of the?
Oh, well, I mean, you see, in terms of, I would say yes, and there is also a reason for that. That the way you produce Ripasso by law, you are actually allowed, because of that process of re-fermenting, you are allowed to basically produce 2 bottles of Ripasso every 1 bottle of Amarone. So this means that you basically, the production of Ripasso is basically doubled in Amarone. And specifically, Tommasi, Raphael vineyard is not that big. So being a single vineyard Valpo, the production overall is actually smaller than Ripasso. So based on what I just explained, but also the success that Ripasso category has gained worldwide over the last 30 years, I would say, the answer is yes. This is our top selling wine of the whole 5, top selling in numbers of the 5 wines that we actually have in the tasting section tonight.
And the Veneto area would be the home of Ripasso. I know it's being replicated all over the world. Everybody wants to make a Ripasso now. But
I mean, I would say, Michael, yes and no. I think that more than really replicating Ripasso, some other regions try to replicate the appassimento, the drying process. Besides the fact, again, sometimes the law are so complicated that we need to be careful in explaining the way that everybody understands. Besides the fact that Ripasso as a wine denomination is exclusive to the Valpolicella area, so nowhere else in the world you can call a wine Ripasso, like nowhere else in the world you can call a wine Amarone. But other regions are allowed to experiment some drying of the grapes. And I have to say, in some areas, they almost succeed. In some other areas, they don't. The big difference is that the areas that, in a way, kind of succeed, those grapes don't dry more than like a month, 40 days max. But when we talk about Amarone and as a consequence, Ripasso method, the drying process lasts 100 days. Where is the big difference? That no other grapes than the ones that we grow in this region have such a thick skin, which is the secret of the drying. So going back to your point, other regions experiment and try to replicate wines that are maybe more similar to Arele, I would say, more than Ripasso, because Ripasso method, you can only make it when the grapes are really very, very dry. And that only happens here thanks to Amarone.
Excellent. Super.
And Pierangelo, John wants to know about the aging potential here. So this is 4 years old. We're on 17 here. How long we could lay this down comfortably and speed might be.
So, sorry, is your question about Ripasso or also about Raphael?
Sorry, no, Ripasso. And the Ripasso. The aging potential, yeah.
So, I mean, in a way, I can say something similar in the concept of what I said earlier about Lugana. Technically, Ripasso can probably last up to 10 years. I mean, longer than Lugana. But I mean, what I'm saying is, technically 10 years. What do I personally recommend? 5-6 years. Because of my concern is that those extra 4 or 5 years, the wine might lose the freshness, that bright acidity, which is part of the key of the success. The fact that you enjoy drinking Ripasso so much is thanks to the freshness of the fruit and that nice freshness and level of acidity. The more you age it, the more you will lose that. You can still like it. You might like it even more. That's personal. Myself, I prefer to recommend up to 5, maximum 6 years to really enjoy the characteristic of this wine.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Again, you know, when you answer to those questions, Will, they are, in a way, they're linked to technical aspects, but on the other end, they're also personal. So I'm very much sharing what I personally think, but you don't have to take what I'm saying as the only truth. In the end, you try, you experiment yourself, and then you figure it out.
That's the fun, isn't it? You know, put a case away and try a bottle every year, and
Absolutely.
see. That's where the fun remains. But I love that. I love that same characteristic: the freshness, the acidity. It's really ripe here. There's cherry fruit still here, even though it's much more dense. And so, if you lose that, then what are you left with? A heavy wine after 10 years' time?
Maybe some tobacco, where you get some prune. Would it turn sort of prunier and
more porty then as well? Okay.
Grazie, Michael, to say that. In fact, that is pretty much the characteristic that the Ripasso can gain from the Ripasso method and from the Amarone skins, because the prune really develops in terms of intensity after drying, and therefore when you repass a wine like Ripasso, you get a lot of that.
Super. Okay. Both John and Tony Pierangelo have alluded to tasting these wines in Verona over at the winery. It's not lost on us that may have come up somewhere during the night. So earlier on today, we did mention to Owen, you know, we said, what's the potential of maybe next year having a few people that might come over on a trip? We were to do a trip to Rioja last year with some of our customers, and that fell through. So it would be wonderful to think that maybe in a year's time or less, you know, we might be onto you and to try and organize a trip and to come over to the winery. You guys have hotels and a big hospitality operation, I believe, as well.
Yeah, we do have an hotel nearby, but besides the hotel, we are very well organized in welcoming people, either consumers or trade customers, etc., whoever. And I can say that a tour at Tommasi Vineyards and Winery is very enjoyable and a nice experience. So you guys are very welcome, and it's your call to choose the date in the calendar.
Thank you, very kind. Well, we'll let everyone know in due course when things open up. Let's see if we can. We'll just park that right there, and we'll see if something might come of that. Thank you. That's lovely info.
Thank you, guys.
Will we Italy or probably any score? I don't know if there's any score in the Italy-Turkey match. I'm sure you do, Pierangelo, but we'll maybe jump into the last wine of the evening and then let you, after a little while, get off to. Just before we do, can I pop in and see how people are doing? How are we enjoying it? Are we enjoying the wines? You're here, Pop Drop. You're there, Shay, aren't you? You're probably on mute, as I think an awful lot of people are.
You're not. She's just on mute.
Yeah.
Jerry, you guys are still.
Yeah, no, I was just going to. I don't know. I don't know if Pierangelo is recording the game, but so I don't want to disclose the score, but it's still 0-0.
He did say just before the start, don't worry, Italy won't score in the first half. So
it looks like they won't score in the first half. But can I just say they've certainly, you know, they have certainly scored in terms of the wine so far this evening. Absolutely wonderful. Looking forward to finishing on the Amarone, but it's absolutely wonderful. What impresses me most of all is how harmonized and subtle the tannins are, and yet delivering that structure as well. It's just such easy drinking, and at the same time the wine has immense structure. I think it's wonderful. My find tonight, because I had never tasted it before, I'm ashamed to say, was the Arele. I thought it was wonderful wine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I go back to the presentation one more time to actually show a bit more in details the characteristic of the appassimento. So appassimento, again, I think it's clear to everyone, is the Italian word for the drying process. So when you think of how you make Amarone, first of all, the harvest is totally made by hand, because the grapes are put in smaller baskets, as you can see from this picture. And then you can either put a smaller basket in a open and ventilated room. We call them the drying loft areas, or otherwise, and that's your call as a winemaker, you can also then take from take them from the basket and put them over, lay them over this arele that we could see earlier. Bottom line is, in these big rooms where there are windows all around, you get air circulation. That's the goal. You make the air really circulate a lot. And the grapes last quite long, for 100 days. Again, I mentioned that a little while ago, that the secret that our grapes really carry with them, that actually make Amarone in this area and nowhere else in the world, is actually due to the thickness of the skin. All of the varieties that I mentioned earlier that are quite similar in a way have a very, very thick skin. And when centuries ago, local vintners realized that the thickness of the skin was worth it to try to dry them and obtain a very concentrated wine, that was basically the beginning of what was then called Amarone. So interesting here is to say that in 100 days of drying, the grapes lose approximately 40%. Sometimes it can be higher than 40. That depends pretty much on the characteristic of the winter. The drier the winter is and the colder, the more the grapes lose in terms of weight. And I want to show you how they look like in day one when we begin the drying process, and how they look like at day 100. So you appreciate that they really look like raisins. There is very small amount of juice that you can get from them, but very, very concentrated. So technically, when you crush them and you start the fermentation, you gain a very sweet wine. You get a very sweet wine from the beginning because the high level of sugar makes so that the juice is very sweet. But then, of course, going through a long fermentation, the sugar transforms into alcohol. And the result is a full body wine, dry, by law dry, but with a certain residual sugar in the end, and extremely elegant, extremely complex. We get to talk about that Amarone in a minute. I mentioned earlier a few times aging in barrels, and I can now show you the two sections of our cellar. You can see, as I haven't mentioned that so far, or I haven't explained that so far, that the majority of the barrels that we actually use in our cellar are pretty big, large. They're actually made by oak that come from Slavonia. Here is a good point. I think I have experienced myself traveling a lot throughout the world. How often we say Slovenian oak. That is a mistake. A Slovenian oak does not exist. It is actually Slavonian oak. Similar names, but different regions. So Slovenia is Slovenia, everybody will know. Slavonia is actually in Croatia, so not far from Slovenia in the end, but it is actually called Slavonia. Bottom line, Slavonian oak is very thick and very neutral. And when I say neutral, I mean that it doesn't really deliver any oak flavor to any wine that spends time in them. So going back to our Amarone, the time that is spent in this large barrel is actually 3 years. The complexity that Amarone has requires that long time to really become an adult, starting from being a child, becoming a dry and full body wine, starting from a sweet juice, and in the end, again, in addition to being full bodied, it has a lovely gentleness, very soft tannins, a great elegance. And what you can probably appreciate, and in a way Jerry also mentioned a while ago, all our red wines have that characteristic in common. They look for elegance, they aim for elegance and drinkability, rather than looking for dry tannins, hard tannins, or maybe too jammy, too big, and so on and so forth. So elegance is the key to really have, in a way, everyone to enjoy without finding the wine too much, too big, too whatever. If you guys didn't know Amarone, if this was really your first time to taste Amarone, I would really like to ask, would you guess that this wine is actually almost 15.5% alcohol? Honestly, would you guess that? I think and I hope that the majority of you, if not all of you, would say no. That is actually the sense when Amarone is so well balanced, everything is so well integrated, and when the gentleness and the elegance really represents the key, without really letting you guys feel the alcohol, which is high, because again, technically, you come from a very concentrated and sweet wine, and when you transform that big amount of sweetness into you transform that large amount of sugar into alcohol, in the end, of course, the alcohol is quite high.
Anytime I've been in the Veneto, I've eaten an awful lot of steak tartare. This is what they give me with the Amarone, and it works perfectly with this wine, but it's not something that I eat normally.
Well, I agree with you, and we mentioned 2 or 3 times earlier with the other wines how long you can age, right? So going back to talk about food match or how long you can age a wine, the two things are very much together when you describe the food match with an Amarone. What do I mean to say? Amarone lasts almost forever. Here I can say no doubt. You can age it for minimum 20 years, most of the time longer. So in such a long time, you really appreciate how well the wine aged and how much you can develop the complexity over the years. So when you have it young, you probably enjoy more certain kind of food. When you enjoy it much older and much more complex and much more matured, then you might change your mind and go more for something else. So it really depends very much on the vintage, and then again, in the end, it is also personal. I mean, everybody has a personal choice for every wine. But yes, tartare, I mean, red meat in general is always a great match when you have Amarone. The older the Amarone is, the more you would appreciate roasted red meat game, actually, and very aged cheeses as well.
So does it kind of, the tannins soften quite a lot? Do they, does it become, like, so the whole profile must change of it, does it, after, say, 20 years old? What is it, after 20 years, how is it? Is it much softer wine, much more delicate?
Yeah, it would be softer. It would be, I mean, much more complex in the nose. I mean, you know, when the wine is still young, like it is right now, you get more the prune or dark cherry, etc. When it gets older, you get a lot of tobacco. You get a lot of licorice as well. And then in a month, you will be like so velvety, extremely balanced. You don't lose that really sense of structure, but at the same time, you really be so again so velvety, so balanced. I don't know what else I can say, honestly. I mean, a phenomenal wine, and one of the wines that you can definitely age for a long time. One of those wines that if you have something important to celebrate, you can store this wine. I mean, in the last few years, when all of the members of my generation have had children, it's not been hard to decide which is the wine to hold back in our cellars and then open when our kids get maybe 18-year-old or they get married or whatsoever, because this wine really lasts.
Would it be correct in saying that you don't go through barrels very often in Italy, in Veneto?
We don't, sorry, go say it again, Michael.
So you reuse your barrels all the time. You don't use the barrels for the taste of the oak.
The barrels. Yeah. Well, actually, that very much depends on the barrels. And thank you for the question, because this brings me back to the characteristic of these Slavonian oak barrels. They can actually be used for up to 40, 45 years.
Yeah.
Very long time. Yeah, they are very thick. So the oak itself is thick and neutral, and the barrels are very thick. So every now and then you basically scrape them inside, you of course to kind of let the oak be more open to oxygenation. But it takes a long time before there is nothing more from the oak to really deliver, or to not deliver to the wine in terms of flavor, but to let the wine actually age. And that's the time when you throw them away and you buy brand new. So that is actually the main difference between the Slavonian oak and French or American oak, that these barrels really last can be used for a very long time.
Well, I was just thinking about we make our whiskey using barrels from all different places, but very seldom ever Amarone, and it's only because you never use them until they're gone. You never.
Yeah, pretty much. And for those people who are not really familiar with the Slavonian oak, just to give you an idea of the size, when you think of the smaller French or American oak barrels, you mean 220 liters or say 500 liters. I mean, the smaller Slavonian oak that we have in our cellar, their size is actually 3,500 liters. So they're way bigger than the French or American oak. So size is also actually an important characteristic for the aging of the wines that you actually produce.
And how long is the Amarone in oak then?
So 3 years is the Amarone Classico, so the Amarone that we're having tonight. I call it Amarone Classico in a sense that it doesn't really carry any specific name of any specific vineyard. It is actually a blend. I showed a picture of a vineyard earlier, one in particular, which is where we produce most of the Amarone, but there is also another vineyard where we source the grapes for this wine here. However, we also produce a single vineyard Amarone from a specific vineyard called Caflorian, and that is an Amarone Riserva. So to answer your question, Will, in more details, the law for Amarone requires a minimum of 2 years in barrels. And we always do 3 years with this Amarone because we think that 2 years is too short. Amarone Riserva, the minimum time required by law is actually 4 years. So 2 and 4 by law, we actually do 3 and 4.
And you don't, do you do a Reserva?
Yeah.
We do the Riserva with this single vineyard called Caflorian. It's a small production of a single vineyard, and that Amarone actually spends 4 years in the barrel.
You do an Amarone. I've tried one of your Amarone. Divinis, is it?
The Buris, yes.
Oh my God, I had it once, and it's just incredible stuff.
Well, it's time to have it one more time, Michael.
Okay, bring it over.
Well, look, I should thank you, Pierangelo. Like a fantastic presentation, but not just you. Obviously, I mentioned Cassidy's earlier on. They've been brilliant, but particularly to everyone who's on tonight, because Pierangelo, I didn't tell you earlier on, or Owen may have earlier on, but this is the first real weekend that Ireland has opened. So we had even more than twice, 2.5 times. 2.5 times the people that are on tonight signed up for the tasting. They got the wines delivered to their house. They were ready to come. And they'll be happy that it's been recorded, because Dublin is basking in sunshine. It's a really nice night here. So plenty of people have decided to catch up in the recording. We in fairness, we've said that all the time, I suppose, for this, that it is being recorded so people can watch it back. And so we'll send that recording to them. But for all of you guys who did tune in tonight, it's thank you, because these tastings don't happen without all of you who are interested in them. It's a total privilege for me and for us, Pierangelo, to talk to you directly. And I hope everyone else really enjoyed it as well. I really hope you did. I think there's some happy faces and some full wine glasses that look fairly empty as soon as they're full. So it looks like, and hopefully you've even tried some of those recipes. We never even spoke about the recipes and the food matches tonight. But again, the chefs did a great job, Pierangelo, in putting putting those together. So thank you for that. You have a match to get to for the second half, and please God, Italy score a goal. To the rest of you, I'll send details early next week on the recording of the tasting, the links for the wines, and any more details that we need next week. But Pierangelo, to you, thank you very much for a really wonderful night.
Fantastic.
A real privilege, and we, please God, we'll see you in Verona sometime soon.
Grazie, grazie. Thank you all. I really enjoyed very much, and thank you for this great attendance. I can actually, I guess you guys have a copy of the presentation. Otherwise, either or you or myself can send it to you. You can share it to everyone.
I'll do that.
Thank you, and again, thank you all. Enjoy a beautiful summer, and I look forward to seeing you guys in person, either here or in Ireland. It's a really great feeling that we all of us can say we are seeing the lights out of this tunnel, I guess, right?
Yeah. Here.
Lovely, grazie a tutti. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Buonanotte. Enjoy the weekend. Ciao, ciao.
Have a great
Bye.
weekend. Pierangelo.
75 people
Grazie,
signed up for
grazie,
only
grazie.
30 arrived because he was just explaining that
The
it was the
weather,
first time.
yeah.
Well, the first time we've opened up,
Everyone's
and you
gone
know,
out.
yeah, exactly. But they've signed in that they're
We're on
going
mute.
on there.
We're on
Very
mute.
good.
I didn't get the full prices, but yeah.
So,
Thanks for coming along,
really
folks.
Yes.
Just have it. It was wonderful.
Well done, guys. Great tasting. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. He was
Yeah, super.
He was fantastic.
Yeah.
thank you,
Well done,
Will.
Will.
We loved it.
Thanks, guys.
Happy campers.
Yeah, super. Great wine.
Hey, Sean, how you getting on?
We're here. Collins, I'm sorry we didn't get to
Yeah.
hear your opinions and votes earlier on in the evening. So hopefully you enjoyed.
We're going to bring the rest of it down to the beach tomorrow morning, Will.
If there is a
See ya.
The quiet house there anyway. Enjoy the evening, guys. And thanks for checking in.
Pavel is up there in the top left. Have you enjoyed it, Pavel?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good night, Pavel.
Oh, that's sweet.
Pavel, we love the chair. We love your chair.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. See you guys. Yeah.
See you guys. Well done. Great tasting. Fabulous. I love those wines, Jerry.
Brilliant.
Oh my
Absolutely,
God.
yeah. Actually, and you know something, it wasn't even the biggest wine. What that was the
It's always the best part, but I think
We're all done.
we're nearly all out. Pavel, thanks for coming along, man.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me actually.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can
we
hear
got you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation for this first time ever wine tour,
Yeah,
wine tasting with the Wine Online. That was actually great and
Did you learn?
unbelievable. All these wines taste so great and
they're good, aren't they?
yeah.
They're good. And yeah, you look good. You look set on your throne, Pavel.
Well, I can't drink anymore of this wine anymore because I just tried so good wine, you know.
Exactly. Now you're in trouble, Pavel. You're in a world of trouble now because now you've tasted some of this stuff. It's good, isn't it? It's
We
good
have
wine.
you now.
Yeah, and the corks. I see you have corks there. Look at Michael. You remember I mentioned you, mine.
You told me. Oh my
Oh
God.
Lord.
Brilliant.
This is mine.
Pavel, you win, Pavel.
You told me that your wife drank most of that.
I can't add any more to it, you know.
Very
Really
good.
full.
And Anne, you're checking in. You're there as well.
You're on pre-holiday, and
We didn't see you earlier on, but and you're on mute, so I don't know if you're supposed to be on mute, but we didn't see you earlier on, so I didn't get to come to you.
excellent.
Anyway,
Okay.
we will say goodbye, guys. Thank you all for checking in. Have a great weekend, and
Great tasting.
we'll see you Monday, Pavel, and happy
Thanks,
holidays. And we'll see you all again soon. See you, folks.
Have a good weekend. See you.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.